and welcome to Your Coaching Journey, a podcast for doctors about coaching. Whether you're a coaching doctor, a doctor who is learning to coach, or a doctor who'd like to build coaching into your professional life, then this is the podcast for you.
Hello, I'm Helen Leathers, and with me today is my co-host and business partner, Tom Dillon. Hi, Tom. How are you today?
I am wonderfully well. I'm marvellous. I'm splendid. All of those superlatives that I've failed to mention in the last few weeks when I've just been, I'm all right. So how are you, Helen?
Well, I'm wonderful and marvellous.
Of course you are.
As well. So,
know this.
yeah. What are we talking about today, Tom?
Today we are talking about 360-degree feedback, or multi-source feedback if you prefer. I know that's a phrase that's often used in medical circles,
Okay.
Multi-source feedback.
I see.
But more commonly known as 360 feedback.
Excellent. Okay, so for those of our listeners who are unaware, what is 360-degree feedback?
So essentially, it's a tool that's used to gather feedback about a person's workplace performance, behaviour, from a variety of sources. So usually including managers, peers, direct reports, stakeholders, potentially patients within a medical setting. Quite often the person themselves will be asked to score themselves against certain criteria, and then everyone else will be able to ask to score them as well. So it tends to be a mixture of quantitative and qualitative. So the quantitative stuff is how do they perform against these different criteria? Mm-hmm. And then at the end, there'll always be a space that says, what does this person do well? What could they do better? That's those sorts of open-ended comment things. Mm-hmm. So that's then compiled into a report, and obviously the person receives the feedback by having a look at the report.
And presumably it's called a 360-degree feedback report because it's a full circle, rounded view of how someone's perceived. So upwards to management, downwards to team, sideways to...
Yeah. So, as many people as you want within the organisation, really. And obviously, people get a lot of feedback from their manager, but this includes insights from people that wouldn't necessarily give them feedback. Mm-hmm. They might be noticing stuff, but just not telling them. Mm. So it's quite useful in that respect. So it gives that holistic view.
And anonymous, one hopes.
And anonymous, yes. So, when the feedback comes, I guess so the person themselves fills the form in, their manager will fill the form in. So the manager is never anonymous in terms of their scoring, because there's just one of them.
Yeah. And
as much as it is anonymous, people know how people write, and they go, "Oh yeah, I know who that is. I could tell." And that's always. I always say to people, it's not intended for you to think who said that. What? But that's human nature. You're not going to stop people from doing that.
Mm. So I can see how this might be useful in terms of someone's development, but I can also see that some people are likely to be potentially upset maybe by feedback that they receive.
Oh, yes.
So you don't just get a report.
Well, some people do. I coached someone recently he's on a leadership development program. So as part of that program, had been asked to complete 360, had been assigned a coach to go through the feedback with him, but had been sent the report ahead of the coaching session. So, So I think most responsible organisations take the view that the feedback needs to be explored with the participant alongside an impartial third party, like a coach. That is generally how it's done. And that in the past, that's always how it's been done. I've been involved with organisations that have said, we want someone to have some coaching around this. We'll organise the 360. We'll send it the 360 to you. And then you can sit down with the coachee and have that conversation. That's normally how it's done. So I was quite surprised that this person had the feedback, had maybe had a couple of days to look at it before they had the coaching session. So you could say, well, that's great because I have time to reflect. But
time to get angry. Or...
Yeah. So I've certainly had those situations where people have reacted badly to feedback, even when they're going through with me in the room. So I've been fortunate, throughout my sort of 15 years of coaching, sit alongside hundreds of 360 participants as they've encountered their feedback. And I have observed the way people respond to it. And I think that's really interesting because all human nature is there in people's responses. So some people will be quite philosophical and just accepting of the feedback, and they genuinely see it as a way of increasing their awareness and seeing how other people, and they find it interesting how other people view them. Generally, that tends to be the good feedback. If they have a good 360, that's how they respond. And then they can use it to develop skills, behaviors and things. So others will be very defensive in their sort of acceptance of the feedback and say, well, yeah, it's right. And I'm going to carry on being the way that I am because that's how I need to be. Their feedback is right, but they're wrong about whether I need to do it or not.
I need to be like that, basically. Yeah,
so I had one guy that was told that he had an unhelpful communication style and basically just bossed people about. And there was lots of feedback. There wasn't just one person. There were 5 or 6 different comments saying, yeah, he perhaps needs to soften his style. I said, yeah, I know who said that. I know why they've said it. And yeah, I'm not going to change. So there's a growth mindset for you.
Yeah, interesting.
and obviously some of that is cultural. I think his boss was very much that way. So he'd fitted into that mold of being very command and control. And because that was what was getting rewarded for him by his boss. So why would he change? Except that everyone around him was getting annoyed about it. So he's no longer there. So that's one way of people reacting. Others will just get very angry about the feedback and want to have it out with the respondents. So that's another way. Others just become very upset and distraught about the feedback they've had and feel they're being picked on. So that's something else. I've seen all this in the coaching room. And some will just be very anxious about the feedback and they'll ruminate it for weeks, months, years. Just maybe one comment in the final verbatim section, they'll go, oh, that still bothers me. Years later, and I go, well, I had some feedback years ago. And it stayed with me, that has. so that's,
I can remember one comment made on an appraisal that I had when I was probably 22. And I can still remember that comment. Apparently I lacked tenacity.
Oh.
Which was a fair point. I can totally get. I didn't really.
Well, you don't lack tenacity. You perhaps lack tenacity for the activity that you were being asked to engage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I've learned that about myself. I think years ago, people would have said the same about me. But I found something I love doing and I keep doing it.
Yeah.
I'm very tenacious about it.
Yeah.
And I think you think about my tennis. I'm constantly trying to improve my tennis. I'm very tenacious. But other things, Good. So there's a lovely story that Ben Francis tells. Ben Francis is the founder of Gymshark.
Oh, yes.
The clothing brand. So he quit university at the age of 19, set up Gymshark. He's now 32 and the UK's youngest billionaire.
Wow.
So done very well for himself. Yeah. Anyway, he tells the story that some years ago, so he was fairly well established as the CEO of the business, but was invited to engage in. Someone suggested he did a 360 review just to see what other people thought of him. So the feedback he got was obviously about his character and his behaviours as a leader. And he read it on his own and was just devastated by the comments that were made about it because he thought everyone loved him and he was a multi-millionaire. Everyone, and probably to his face, everyone said, yeah, you're great, Ben. So he kind of went home and just chucked it in the bin and said to his girlfriend, oh, what a waste of time that was. Just went off in a grump and just, anyway, whilst he was out, she read the report. She fished it out of the bin and read it. And when he got back, she said, that is probably the most accurate portrayal I've ever seen of you. So then he had to kind of accept that, he'd got to take it on the chin, that what people were saying was what they saw. So then he set about just working on himself, working on those areas people felt he needed to improve. And, had that growth mindset around it, and fair play,
Yeah.
It's gone from being a multimillionaire to being a billionaire. So,
And I'd just like to say, if anyone's marvelling at how his girlfriend had that conversation, we have got an episode on difficult conversations.
She probably found it very easy to have that conversation. Yep, they're right,
That's
Ben.
you.
That's you.
I love that story. But from what you're saying, it sounds like there's lots of ways for a 360 to be counterproductive.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's what's really important, to have a coach alongside the participant as they are receiving the feedback, so that some perspective can be brought to what is being offered up. So I once had an accountant who, so the company was doing 360 generally, so she wasn't doing it on her own. Everyone was getting a 360 done. I think some people used it to make a point. I think, it wasn't entirely. Yeah. Anyway, so she read it, and some people, she just started crying as she was reading it, and said, why are people being so mean about me? And there were just a couple of unhelpful comments. So someone suggested that she spent a lot of time gossiping. And someone else said if she spent less time moaning about stuff and actually got on with the work, things would be a lot better. Oh. So they're quite pointed.
Yeah.
Remark. But there was obviously something to it. And she did sort of justify the way she behaved by saying, well, I work part-time, and me coming into work is part of my social life, and I like to talk to people. I'm not going to not talk to them. So there was obviously like a misfit in terms of people that were there all day, every day, probably had coffee machine conversations throughout the day. She came in and got all her conversations done in the time she was there, and didn't leave a lot of time. Anyway, so got very upset about it. And what was supposed to be a 1 hour feedback session turned into 2 hours, because she was kind of inconsolable for a while. And, good that I was there, because I think she could have easily gone home or, had it out with people in the office. So
can I pick up on that? Because obviously we're talking about this as a tool that could be used in coaching and a coach facilitating it. This is not something I would facilitate, because I'm not trained in 360-degree feedback, and you are trained in 360-degree feedback.
Well, when you say I'm trained, I've done lots of it.
Okay.
I was never trained to do it. Someone just said, would you like to do this? We'll send you the report. You sit down and have a look at it with them.
Okay.
So, it's not complicated in that sense.
That was me thinking you did a whole training course.
No. If you're a trained coach and you're able to hold that space with people, then I think you could do 360 feedback.
Okay.
I'm sure 360 companies and people that specialize in 360 feedback would say, no, you can't go there. But
you have to come and do our training.
Yeah. No, you don't. Yeah. I am proof that I have handled these situations very well because I'm a trained coach.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Oh.
Yeah, there you go.
You could do it.
But would I want to?
Well, I don't know, you might. So I really enjoy it. I think it's fascinating.
It does sound very interesting.
It's lovely for people to get that rounded view. And I say the guy that I sat with the other week, he'd already had a coaching session around it, but actually sent it to me and said, can we talk it through? I want to reflect on it. So it can be really useful. But it's lovely for me to get an insight, because as a coach, you only ever see what the coach wants you to, the coachee wants you to see. They tell you their story and you go, oh, okay. But then when you get other people's perspectives, yeah,
I can see that might be interesting. It does also still sound quite high risk, though, as a strategy. To get someone to understand themselves better. It's a
it is.
strategy.
It is. Yeah.
So, what are the benefits of a 360 that mean you might take that risk?
Well, I think one of the main benefit is that it provides them with a comprehensive view of their behaviours, their skills, their abilities. So they will have to self-assess themselves. So there's a list of questions. How would you score yourself on this particular competency, let's say? And so they'll give themselves a score. Then everyone else will score them. And, you'll get their peers will score them. So there'll be score for their peers, a score from their manager, a score from their direct reports. And then you can see how well they're scoring themselves against that. And that's where it gets interesting, because if they've given themselves a 5 out of 5, that they're brilliant at it, and other people are scoring a 1, then there's a discrepancy there, isn't there? There's something to think about there.
Yeah.
So I think that can be really useful. And then when it comes to the verbatim comments at the end, yeah, that kind of, it is anonymous. So people do feel a certain amount of freedom to say what they think. And yeah, so they do get some fairly honest feedback that they just wouldn't get otherwise. People are very shy to sort of come forward and say, yeah, you keep doing this, stop doing that. So yeah, and I think it can end up, if people do take it in a very open way, using a growth mindset, they can stop and think about, a bit like Ben at Gymshark, to go, oh, actually, there's obviously something to this. How can I develop myself to iron out some of these things? So we did an episode ages ago about the Johari window, and that idea of, we have things that we know about ourselves and that we share with others, and then things that people know about us but don't share with us, the blind spot. And so I think it's a great way of expanding the arena of our knowledge and reducing the blind spot.
Interesting. So we can help people find out more about their strengths and confirm their strengths, find areas of improvement, areas of development. Yeah,
so I mean, typically it would be, you're looking for the positives, aren't you? That's kind of what you want it to be. You want it to be a positive experience. Yeah. But obviously if there are weaknesses, then that is going to show up in the scoring. And the comments will be both positive. So the questions that tend to get asked are variations of what do they do well and what could they do better? Right. So there's always going to be a section of positive comments and then a section of constructive comments. Yeah. And it's always interesting when you pick a 360 up for the first time. So I always go to the back and look at the comments. And the first thing I do is look at how long the page is with the positive comments and how long the page is with the negative comments. Interesting. So let's weigh that up a little bit. I don't know why I do that, but that's always something that I've done. Just go to, okay, well, this is a good one then. Interesting. Yeah. So it's all very much about building self-awareness. Yeah. For the coachee, and in some ways evidence of how they're perceived by others rather than just conjecture. And perhaps that can help you challenge some assumptions that they have. Yeah, I think a lot of the time people don't. They go quite happily through not really thinking about how other people think about them. That they'll just, well, I do a good job. They don't stop to think about how other people think they're doing the job. So I think it does raise their awareness of the fact that other people are thinking something. And they're not, we might feel we're getting away with it. Yeah, it might be that we're not pulling our weight and we think, I'm getting away with this. But, people tend to notice this stuff. So they will say, yeah. So yeah, you're right. Rather than relying on those vague impressions that they might have, it gives some data, doesn't it? So some evidence. So obviously from a coaching perspective, it gives us as coaches something to work on. So if they are looking to improve, let's say they're looking to improve their leadership, we've actually got some competencies, some skills that they might want to be thinking about in terms of leadership. And we've got scores of where they are now. And we might be thinking, well, how can we improve on that? Interesting. So what else do we need to be thinking about in terms of 360s in the coaching room? So I think one of the things is perhaps the potential for overload when someone is going through their 360, because there could be 30 to 50 different questions about different competencies, and you've got different scores from different groups of people as well, and it can all be just a mess of data. So I think as a coach, you can help to simplify it and look for themes that are coming out of the 360 and look for where there are inconsistencies. So quite often, if they're scoring themselves pretty much the same as everyone else, we don't really need to spend too much time on it other than say, well done, you're doing that well. Look, you think you're doing it well, they think you're doing it well. Jobs are good. Well done. So but where they are out of sync with other people, and that might be from the sense of them not valuing themselves enough. So they might be scoring themselves a 2 and other people are scoring themselves a 5. So it can be quite affirming. So pointing that out to people, well, a lot of people think you're doing that very well. And you've given yourself a really low score. So that can be useful, but also the other way around. So where they're giving themselves a 5 and other people are giving them a 1, it's going, oh, what's going on there then? And actually stopping to think about that. So that can be really useful. So and as I say, the themes, and obviously when it comes to those verbatim comments at the end, there will tend to be, as long as you've got enough people feeding into it, there will be themes that come out in the comments that people make. And again, that can be really useful. So someone I was coaching recently, there were a few comments from his direct reports, or that seemed to be from his direct reports, saying that he didn't stand up for the team enough when talking to the outside organisation. They didn't feel he got their backs. So that was interesting. I mean, yeah, he does, but the perception from them, and probably because he understands the organisation, but perhaps isn't communicating his understanding of the organisation to his team. So they go, well, why isn't he sticking up for us? Anyway, so that's something that could come up. The other thing we've got to be aware of is potential bias. So, whilst it is supposed to be objective, it's still dependent on people giving honest feedback and not bringing personal issues to bear, not making a pointed, well, I'm going to have a go because I can, because it's anonymous. So it is anonymous, but people will generally know who said what. So, and I did have someone that their boss was kind of making a point in. So I mean, this was quite an experienced commercial guy, director level, come into a new organization, been there about 6 months, decided to do this 360 feedback thing. And I think why he was doing it was he didn't want to give people the feedback that he had in his head. He didn't want to sit down and have difficult conversations with people. So he organized a 360 feedback. Obviously, he fed into it. And he's the manager. He's their line manager. So for one guy, he gave him scores of 1s and 2s all the way through it. And the guy I was with just looked at the first page. I'm sat with him, but he's looking at the first page. And he said, I can feel myself getting angry already. I said, okay. And I just kind of closed my report and said, okay, let's talk about this. And he said, it's the boss. I'm not happy. And you could just see it. He's starting to boil. And he said, I want him down here now. I want to have it out with him now. And I said, okay, that's not going to happen, but let's talk about this. And we talked about, and he got the sense that he was, it was being done to him really, that it had been organised so that he could have this feedback. But we talked about how he might use this opportunity to have an honest conversation with his boss, but in a very level, considered way. Quite happy for him to express his disappointment at the scores, but not to have it out with him in an angry, let the anger pass. Let's think about this. What's going to be good for your career? Obviously, you want to address the feedback and have a conversation about it, but how can you best do that in a way that's going to be helpful to you? So that was good evidence that having a coach alongside you can
prevent a fight.
Well, just offer a little bit of objectivity to it and a little bit of perspective to it. So, and I did actually talk to the director about it, and he was quite open about it. He'd used it to deliver feedback. Which is just so unethical, really.
Yeah.
But some people really avoid difficult conversations. So that was his way of doing it.
Interesting.
Not helpful. Okay, so that's another thing that can be, there might be biases. There might be people with scores to settle. It might be people that are avoiding having a proper conversation about stuff. So I don't really think it's a bit like appraisals. Things shouldn't appear in 360s and appraisals that haven't already been discussed. Like if you've got open communication in your team, all these things should be out in the open anyway. But people have their own reasons for keeping it quiet. So obviously another consideration is time and cost. There's a time and cost to doing this. So if an organisation is paying for a 360, they're normally somewhere around £100, £200, something like that. So there's a cost to that. There's obviously a cost to you.
Then that's for each report.
For each report, yeah. There's obviously a cost to the organisation of paying you to come in and coach. But for you as a coach doing the 360, if you're being asked to organise it for the organisation, so I've got a 360 organisation I work with, so I'll get in touch with them. They'll basically do it. But there's still a bit of time and effort on my part, which I'm not getting paid for, unless I build that into my contract.
Yeah.
And I do tend to add a little bit on for admin because there is that part of it. And then obviously I've got to read the report before I sit down with the coachee. So there's additional time there for me to go through the report and make sure I'm familiar with it before I sit down.
So price it carefully if you're being asked to do a 360. Great. So lots of information there. What final tips do you have for coaches looking to use 360 reporting in their coaching?
I think it's important that the coachee feels supported through the process. So you reassuring them that you're not there to stick the boot in. You're not there. You're the messenger rather than it's not your work, and that you're there to support them through it. I think that's important. I don't think we can always head off the emotion that's going to come, but we can be there to just sit alongside them whilst they experience the emotion and hopefully let it pass through and get them to think about it properly and really consider it, but really spend time thinking about how they are going to use it helpfully to move them forward. And I think the reflection aspect is really important. So they're going to be seeing it when you sit down with them and they're going to see it for the first time. So they're probably a bit rabbit in the headlights. They're not taking it all in. So they will probably want time to reflect. So it's actually really useful to set up a further coaching session where they can think about how they're going to implement some of the actions. Because otherwise, what was the point? They've just got disgruntled about the negative stuff. They don't do anything about the positive stuff. So, I think having some sort of follow-up is really helpful.
So support, reflect, follow up. It sounds like 360-degree feedback reports can be an incredibly valuable tool for coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan.
I know you are. Yeah. And it sounds like you've got those insights coming from multiple perspectives, and that really can drive self-awareness. It can drive improvement, development, growth.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm just doing one for someone now. He's a director of a construction company. What's interesting is we did an exercise 5 years ago where we put 50 people in that organisation through that process, and it was really helpful. They've never done it since. So I'm now coaching this director. I was saying, do you know what? I think 360 would be really. You haven't done one for such a long time. Because he's struggling to know how people feel about him. He's got this idea that they think he's this kind of project monster that insists they do everything on time. And he's not like that, but he thinks that's how they're thinking. So actually for him to get proper feedback from them will be really helpful. Just for him to go, okay, well, where are we and how are people feeling about this? And I'm hoping that on the back of that, the organisation will go, yeah, actually, we really ought to do that again. Because it's so helpful.
Thank you. That's been incredibly helpful, incredibly useful. Hopefully our listeners found it useful as well.
Yeah, hopefully it's convinced you that you could be doing 360 feedback.
I could be doing 360 feedbacks. Yeah.
Hopefully I haven't put you off.
No, I don't think you've put me off at all. I think, it needs to be sort of considered.
Yeah, I might be terribly naive. People might hate me because I was sat alongside them whilst they read their 360.
Maybe.
Bloody Tom Dillon giving me that feed.
Well, yes, if you found that useful, make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss an episode of the podcast and won't miss out on future discussions. Until next time, when we'll be talking about...
Easy change and hard change.
Easy change and hard change. Okay. Yeah. Until then, we'll say take care for now. And
thank you, Helen.
See you next time.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye for now.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.